Hey guys, this is Cheryl Nembhard.
And I'm Dwayne Beckford.
And you're listening to the Safe Space Podcast,
a limited series podcast on Black men and mental health.
Well, guys, we have an incredible episode coming for you. You are going to be enlightened and challenged with this one. We are talking about anxiety and OCD disorders. My goodness.
Yep.
This is one for me. I parent a child, well, no longer a child, but a young adult who struggles with anxiety and has been crippled by it in some instances, and it's been a desperate journey for tools.
Right.
And you know, what's interesting for me, and I can share openly on this, is that there was a tension there for me being a woman of faith, because there's that quick sort of response of, we'll just pray it away.
Just pray it away, yep.
But as we're praying, you know, is there anything we can do in the day-to-day to help manage, to help cope?
This is such an important conversation. For me, much like the one on toxic masculinity and narcissism, make sure you check that one out.
Yes. Oh, yes.
Anxiety and OCD are words that are thrown around so loosely.
Yeah.
And oftentimes, you know, they are misrepresented in our society and in our culture. So I'm looking forward to this conversation with our esteemed professionals who are going to really tell us what these buzzwords mean that are thrown around so loosely, so that we can have a greater understanding of what they mean.
Yeah.
And we can stop self-diagnosing ourselves and putting things on ourselves and get some real practical tools on how we can deal with these things that many people are struggling with.
Yeah, so it's time to be educated and equipped, and we're so excited to have our expert panel with us again. These guys are absolute rock stars. We have Jermaine Morrison in the building, Roxanne Francis, and Andrew Blackwood. I can't wait to tell you all about them. Why don't you roll out a bio or two?
All right, let's start with Mr. Jermaine Morrison, who is a registered social worker and has been involved in many community projects and initiatives over the last 20 years. He's worked alongside many reputable institutions, including York University, Seneca College, the City of Toronto, the Toronto District School Board, and Francis Psychotherapy, where he's currently serving as an associate therapist. Jermaine continues to advocate for better access to mental health services for the Black community and facilitate mental health seminars and speaking engagements in the GTA. So welcome, Mr. Jermaine Morrison. And with him, we also have Coach Andrew Blackwood, who has been using healing communication to address the spiritual, emotional, and mental health needs of individuals, couples, families, and organizations for more than 17 years. We really welcome him today to add to this incredible conversation about anxiety and OCD.
Yeah, and I have to say, if you just turn on certain shows, I'm telling you what he has to share. He's a strong media presence as well. And I just love how he is bringing awareness wherever he goes on this issue. And speaking of media, got a powerhouse in the building who's been on probably every news show you've seen here in Canada. Love her. She's one of my favorites. This is Roxanne Francis. Let me tell you a little bit about her. She's an award-winning registered social worker and a psychotherapist. She's the CEO of Francis Psychotherapy and Consulting Services, where she runs a busy group therapy practice. She's also a keynote speaker, leadership coach, and a corporate consultant who addresses issues relating to women's issues, race and equity, mental health, parenting, as well as wellness at work. Roxanne supports and mentors other therapists in the field and is also the media's go-to mental health expert, providing answers to many of life's difficult questions. Basically, we have the Avengers assembled of mental health in the Black community.
Absolutely.
Here we go. Well, guys, I can't wait to kick off this conversation. I'm excited. I've got my virtual notebook and pen out. I cannot wait, which means I'm going to just replay this 1,000 times for me. But let's kick it off by getting some working definitions, shall we? Can you define for us anxiety and OCD, the similarities, the differences between the two, as well as the main causes for this disorder? I'd love to start, Roxanne, with you, if I may.
All right, let me see if I can do this some justice. So anxiety is this, I like to call it the overactive fear response And it really happens when there is this pervasive uneasiness or nervousness regarding an impending activity or some kind of an event or outcome in terms of people's responses towards you. It's this idea that I know what's going to happen, or I know what they're thinking, and it's all bad, right? And it takes over, really, for many people who live with severe anxiety. As it relates to OCD, which is obsessive compulsive disorder. And what that means is when someone has these recurring thoughts, these intrusive thoughts over and over and over, hence the term obsessive. And then from those thoughts, we have these behaviors that people feel compelled to complete. And these behaviors they're compelled to do these over and over again, hence the term compulsion, right? And so oftentimes when people present with OCD, there is a component of anxiety at the root of that. And, if someone has anxiety, doesn't mean that they're going to have OCD, but OCD usually has at its root some kind of anxiety. And it's really important that we, when clients come to myself or any of the other panelists, I'm pretty sure that clients often come asking for strategies. How do I get strategies to get rid of these things? And it's all good to talk about strategies, but we also have to talk about, what's at the core so that we can start kind of, peel back the onion layers a little bit to address what's going on at the core belief or the core thought in order to address it.
So good. Thank you so much for that. Jermaine, any thoughts from you?
Honestly, Roxanne pretty much all of it. I will only just briefly say that when we talk about anxiety, now anxiety itself, there's levels to it, right? So we want to make sure we distinguish the fact that when it comes to anxiety, it could be as like simple nervousness. So for example, if anybody knows me, I play music, I play piano, and I go to different places to play. And sometimes there is a certain nervousness, in terms of, anything can happen, because especially when you're performing, anything can happen, right? But it does not deter me from at least continue to perform and do the work I'm going to do. When we're talking about severe anxiety, it just gets to the point where it's like you feel like you're incapable of completing any type of work or any type of task. OCD, almost kind of like in a situation where it's like you feel like you have to do things over and over again because you're just not satisfied that, even though it's completed, it almost feels like you have to do it again and again. Because I've seen a lot of students almost like, oh, I have to erase, like, for example, artwork. I see a lot of students like have trouble, thinking that, for example, if they're doing some sort of artwork, they have to do it again because they made a mistake, and they have to go back over and over again when things are just fine. Just stuff like that. But just to mention it all, like, there's always levels to it. So we just want to make sure we keep that in mind.
So good. And Coach Drew, I know that this is really your wheelhouse. You do a lot of work in this area, especially with children and young people. Do share your thoughts on anxiety and OCD.
I love how everybody is sharing different angles and how we can come about it, addressing it. And I do a lot of work with parents who aren't necessarily mental health professionals. So how I like to explain anxiety is simply a picture of the future that is negative. Whenever you picture a future that is negative, like the horror movie called Your Life, your body will respond with anxiety. And that's true for everyone. And anxiety is like this umbrella category, and then you have all these other more intense experiences, which OCD is a particular one. And I know that one so well. Quite often, it starts, okay, my perspective anyways, in this world, this broken world, we all have our own vulnerabilities and uniquenesses. So I think a lot of us come wired a particular way, and I am wired a particular way. And like most other people that I've helped address OCD is when they're under periods of intense stress, it flares up. So when I moved from Jane and Finch to Leslie and Finch, which is just a 20-minute drive, as most people in the GTA know, but it's a completely different world, at least back in the 80s, right? I moved from being the only, I moved from a school where there were 3 white kids in the school to a school where there were 3 black kids in the school. It was a total different world, right? And what I found was like, I was so uncomfortable. I didn't know it at the time, but I would do these weird things. I'll give you an example. The teacher asked the question, so what's your favorite number? I didn't have a favorite number. This is grade 3. What's your favorite number? And I was like, and everybody else got a favorite number? I got to have a favorite number. So I said, okay, 5. 5 is my favorite number. And I'm like, what?
5 is
yeah? So I'm like, what do you do with 5? So I started doing things with the number 5. But I had to make sure whatever I did on the left side, I had to do on the right side. So 5 this, 5 that. If I was taking a drink, it would be 5, but then it couldn't be 5. It had to be 10. And that's when I realized for the first time, I had this kind of compulsion around even. If I was taking a step, if I was walking somewhere, it couldn't be odd. I couldn't end it on an odd number. I'd have to, adjust my stride so it would be even, right? And if I didn't do that, I would feel uncomfortable. I would feel unsettled. And that's what a lot of OCD kind of rituals or behaviors are like. You feel this intensity, you feel this discomfort, and the only way to relieve it is by doing a particular thing, right? So it might not be noticeable to people. It might not even be a problem. However, when it becomes a problem, to Jermaine's point, where you're unable to move through life without doing these things, it's important to be able to understand it and learn how to navigate it so it doesn't prevent you from moving forward and having a full life.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much for that. I feel like we have definitely a baseline in terms of what anxiety and OCD is, which is for many people listening, even myself included, prior to last year, I didn't really understand what anxiety was. OCD was like, oh, my mom loves to keep a clean house, so she's always, and I guess that's a part of it, but really to take it to that clinical understanding. Thank you all for sharing that. And that kind of leads to our second question. How do these disorders impact different aspects of a Black man's life, such as relationships, work, and overall quality of life? I'll throw this to you first, Roxanne.
Well, that's a big question. We have spoken other episodes on this podcast around, the weight that Black men carry in this world, the stigma as it relates to mental health, the stereotypes that society has about them. And when you think about all those things, it's not a far stretch of the imagination to understand why many Black men have anxiety, right? Am I living up to stereotypes? Am I doing all the things that the guys, say I should do? Am I man enough? Am I strong enough? Am I earning enough? Am I masculine enough? All of these pieces can lead to some anxiety. And like Jermaine said, having this anxiety doesn't necessarily mean that there is a disorder, right? But if then it comes to the point where you're constantly worried about the future, you're constantly having that negative depiction of the future to the point now where it's getting in your way of functioning. If you are constantly irritable, one of the things that I always say often rather, is that anger really is a secondary emotion, right? Like it shows up, but there are so many other things underlying that. And so an anxious Black man may come off as angry or aggressive or irritable. And he may not even realize that he has anxiety. He just knows that he has this uneasiness, this tension, and it comes off as aggression. And so we have to be curious. I often talk to my clients about living from a place of curiosity, taking a look at that thing and turning it around and going, what's really going on here? And so often when we see young Black men, older Black men, grandfathers even, who are quick to be angry, instead of saying, oh, they're so aggressive, they're so angry and upset, we need to really be curious and offer grace and really question what's going on here. And the same thing as it relates to something like OCD, right? As Andrew said, it may not even be visible, right? But that person knows what that feeling is like. And so they may walk around with potentially a chip on their shoulder or this feeling of perfectionism, right? And that kind of thing really needs to be unearthed and really examined. And where is that coming from?
Wow, thank you. That is so good. Jermaine or Coach Drew, you want to add to that?
Let me quickly add, a lot of the times when for Black men, they're having to deal with the fact that they do have, negative mental health issues. It feels crippling because they feel like what they're supposed to be and the reality of what they are, it can feel a little bit debilitating because the expectation is, the Black person is supposed to be out there doing their thing, working hard, providing, protecting, be strong. You know what I mean? The problem you have, especially when it comes to anxiety, I have a couple of dear friends that, one of them suffer with panic attacks, right? So, sometimes when they're at work, it's hard for them to function at work or to do the tasks that they're supposed to do because all of a sudden they're getting anxiety or the situation they're in is so overwhelming that it manifests into either severe anxiety, anger, panic attacks of some sort, or OCD, just in order to cope. So for a Black man having to deal with that, it does become very hard for them to cope through that and to accept it. But it's not to say that there's no solution to it.
Right.
But just in that moment, they just feel incapable. And it's hard for a Black man when the expectation is they're supposed to do something, but they can't do it because they're dealing with their mental health in that way.
That's so good. And, I'm excited about finding solutions and steps and coping mechanisms. And I think I'd love to throw this to you, Coach Drew. I'm excited to hear your answer on this. What are some of the effective strategies and treatments for dealing with and managing just day-to-day management of anxiety and OCD, both short-term and long-term, sir?
Wow. Oh, I'm so glad we're having this conversation. Let me start.
I know, right?
with many people have a different opinion, I imagine, but I'm gonna own my opinion here. There's a difference between coping and change. Right?
We'll talk about that.
Coping is about just getting through. And if we think about, I like to consider a spectrum of a quality of life, okay? So on the one hand, we have survival. Then you have coping. Then you have living, and then you have thriving. Especially, everyone has gone through trauma, I believe, pretty much everyone, and we survive it. And then we move just beyond survival to coping. And I think coping is the downfall of, most of us in our community. Because some of our coping strategies, they could actually be healthy. Going to the gym, connecting with friends, right? Going for a walk, all those kinds of things. And the pandemic robbed us of those kinds of things, right? But then a lot of our coping strategies, they're not healthy. Let's talk about smoking marijuana. Let's talk about it for a minute, okay? It's right? It's an age-old cultural kind of experience. And I personally don't smoke marijuana. Like I told you, I have my own vulnerabilities. I have my own history of family mental health stuff. Black people are more vulnerable. Black men are more vulnerable to certain kinds of mental health challenges. And smoking marijuana makes it worse. You can have a substance-induced psychosis from smoking marijuana. People don't want to believe it, but
Wow.
You want to say that again for the people in the back?
You should see the reaction of the other two therapists.
They ain't ready for this. They ain't ready for this.
They're like,
they
speak
don't want
those
they don't want to
things.
believe it. They don't want to
man,
believe
you better
it.
preach. Yes.
So I've just, I might not
Lord.
be, I might not be the well-liked guy after this, but it doesn't matter to me because
Island, Black men, Island.
I've worked in children's mental health for years, and to see the impact that it has on these youth, male and female. And the assumption is, oh, it's not going to have a problem. It's not going to have an impact. But the longer you smoke it is, the more likely it's going to have a challenge for you. And, you know, some people, it creates other disorders like depersonalization, derealization disorder. That's where you lose the ability to tell the difference between what's real and what's not for weeks, months. Okay? So I'm not taking the risk because I know me. I know me already. Like I'm this far away on a good day, okay, from losing my mind, right? So I'm not going to take any chances. The point I'm trying to make here is we do things to help ourselves feel better. That's coping, but that's not addressing the issue. We want to learn how to address the issue. And let's talk about stress. It's a part of life. Black men's stressors, a little bit different than other people's, right? And we are not designed, okay, we're designed by God to be able to handle stress. But to live beneath the weight of stress indefinitely, we're not designed for that. So stress is a trigger for underlying mental health challenges. And if we couple that with coping with things that are not healthy and helpful for us, we're setting ourselves up. So to Roxanne's point, it's important that we learn how to address the issue, deal with the issue, make those lifestyle changes so that we're not under this stress constantly. And I'll say one more thing that I think is an important factor. We are designed to be unique human beings. Everyone has a unique thing to contribute to this world. And so much of the time we're put in these boxes and these categories where you have to be this way, you have to be, do you hear that? You have to. Yeah. That is like, you know, inducing compulsion. Like I have to fit in, I have to be this way, I have to do this way. And it really impairs our sense of self. Our sense of esteem is eroded, and you cannot be the best version of yourself without having a healthy sense of who that person is, so you can give the best of yourself to this world. So when we start to learn who we are, love who we are, live out who we are, we move from survival to coping, and then from coping to living. And then once we start living, and we, like, the good life isn't all about just having money. It's about having access to the fullness of who you are. And when you start living and you love that, you're giving, you're supporting, you're doing all this stuff, then you enter into a realm of thriving. And that's where I want to see each person in the world, but especially, you know, to our topic today, Black men and mental health.
Thank you so much. Goodness, such a full rich answer. Yeah, actually, I was going to throw to you, Roxanne, to add any last additional thoughts.
Yeah, I think my social work brain is tingling here as Dr. Drew is talking about, you know, he said that, and I agree with you, that Black men are more susceptible to mental health challenges in our world. And I just want us to take a look at that from a systems issue, because otherwise we can, you know, there are individuals who will think, well, it's just me, or maybe it's just my race, or maybe it's just my people. Well, the truth of the matter is our people have been under stress and strain and unhealthy levels of stress for hundreds of years. And in our society today, you know, when our skin is seen as a weapon, when a 16-year-old boy is seen as a harmful Black man, we have to acknowledge that these are stressors that never go away.
Yes.
And so, you know, when Black men are thinking about their mental health and why do I feel like this and what's going on, yes, we have to look at what's going on at the core, but we also have to look at a wider systems issue and then talk about how can we keep ourselves healthy in the system that we live in. And it may mean that we have to dig in a little harder than other people in order to not only for us to survive and cope and live, but to thrive.
Yeah.
But we need to recognize that this is the world that we live in, and that we have to find ways as a collective in our system for us to not just survive, but to thrive.
So good.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you so
you.
much. That is needed. I swear this whole podcast is like therapy for me.
I know.
Wow. You
Basically, he was like, Cheryl, how do I get 8 weeks of therapy
free
for
therapy.
free? you do media, figure it out.
Oh man, thank you both for that. And it kind of leads into the next question, which is how can family and loved ones support the Black men in their lives who are struggling with these disorders? And what are some of the common misconceptions that people have about them?
Oh gosh, please help us.
It's Jermaine.
Okay. All right. I think one of the most important things, I think for anybody that is supporting somebody that's struggling with anxiety or OCD, let's begin to educate ourselves first, right? I think that's kind of where it starts there, because then the approach, yes, you're not a professional, you're not like a therapist or a social worker or whatever, but there are some things that you can recognize at least, or understand some of the triggers that your loved one's going through that's causing, that loved one to suffer with or have anxiety attacks, if you will, or at times where things become like, or OCD. And what I mean by this, one of the things that I mentioned this actually earlier, sometimes you have to kind of learn to be present in the moment, right? To quickly try to quote unquote solve the problem quickly for the person that's going through some stuff may not be helpful. It may exacerbate the situation.
Right.
Obviously understand the triggers and allow that person to kind of talk things through. So for example, it was funny, I was just talking to my friend Mandela. Him and I have a podcast together, and he suffers from panic attacks. So I asked him directly, it's like, what are some of the things that he's done to help cope? Well, one of the things that has helped him is that he needs to be in the presence of people that he loves, his wife, his dog, those are some of the things that have helped him to at least calm down when things get a little bit overwhelming. Obviously, there are other methods, but when a person who has a loved one that is dealing with a mental health issue, try to educate themselves first. And then secondly, honestly, make sure you can support them by at least direct them towards a professional, right? Because at least that way, there's extra support, extra resources for that person to kind of not just cope, as Andrew rightfully and eloquently spoke of, but now we have to get them from coping to living and hopefully thriving throughout the process.
Oh, so good. Dr. Drew, you want to weigh in on this?
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah. Here we go.
I'm gonna try and just rein it in a little bit. I'll focus on particularly parents. I agree with Jermaine that it's important for us to be informed so that we can be proactive. A lot of the times, these challenges start or become apparent when we're children. But we are not aware, or we're like, they'll just grow out of it. We don't grow out of it. We don't grow out of it. We might grow developmentally through certain things and not worry about those particular things. But there is a way of thinking about life. We have these certain thought patterns. Those thought patterns don't change, right? And when I listen to parents and I listen to people talk, I can hear the way that they think. The language that we use it's so important to be aware, not just of the intention, but of the impact. So as we engage with people, as we talk to people, we don't realize that we're actually making life more difficult for them by the way that we talk. For example, especially if you're dealing with a child who is struggling with anxiety, to say, if you can't manage this, how you gonna manage that? You know what you just did, right?
Access is complimentary, free bonus.
For the people who might not, my poor Jamaican accent, for the people who might not understand what I said, if you're not able to handle this small situation, so number one, they're minimizing the child's concern or the teen or the adult male's concern. They're minimizing it because they don't have a problem with it, right? Because we're all the same. If I don't have a problem with it, you shouldn't have a problem with it. That's what they're doing. But then they're also implanting ideas to say that, well, if this is small, you're not going to be able to manage that either. That's the last thing somebody who's already feeling anxious is going to want to hear and imagine. Because now they're imagining your words to be true. Words are seed, and you're planting that seed. And that seed is going to grow. So the very thing that you don't want to have happen, you're actually cultivating. So it's important to connect with people who can support you to make those changes. This is what I do every day. As opposed to saying, you know what, if you can't manage this, then no, to say that, you know what, I've seen you do something similar to this before. I can see that you're nervous about it, but I believe you're capable. How can I help you? You will change that child, that teen, that adult man's life just from the power of your words. It doesn't take a lot to change. What it takes is a willingness, right? Are you willing to be open? Are you willing to invest in changing yourself, right? Not focusing on fixing the man in front of you, but realizing, okay, how am I unintentionally contributing in a way that's not helpful? We can make those changes. So I think those are important things that we all can do.
Wow, so good.
Listen, if you are listening and watching and nodding your head like me, my neck is literally sore. It has been sore for a couple of days now because I'm just, yes. I'm so thankful for the wisdom that's in the room, the knowledge that's in the room. And I encourage you guys to follow these incredible people, track with them, reach out to them for any services that you need. Get to know these voices because they are changing the game for mental health in the Black community. And I'm so thankful. Well, I could stay here forever. I know we could stay here forever,
Literally.
but we are down to our last question, and I'm really excited about your sort of final thoughts. So as you know, our podcast is called Safe Space. And this is where we can talk without judgment, without any borders or hindrances about mental health and the Black community. I would love your final thoughts. You are speaking now to the Black man who is listening about anxiety and OCD. What are your final thoughts in the safe space? I think I'll throw this to Roxanne first, if you don't mind.
No, I don't mind at all. What I would say to the Black man that's out there listening is that your anxiety, your OCD is not, it's not evidence that you're somehow broken. You are a whole individual. You are worthy, and we love you. I want you to take a look at the world around you. I want you to take a look at your people's history, and I want you to take a look at, just our world today. We have so many conveniences at the tips of our fingers, yet we are busier than ever before. It is not outside of the realm of possibility that you have anxiety, right? I want you to be patient with yourself. I want you to find someone that you can talk about things with. And when you have moments when you find yourself feeling anxious, you find yourself struggling with the what if thoughts, I want you to just kind of slow down and remind yourself of what is true about you, of what is true about your situation, the people in your life, the people who are close to you, the people who love you, the things in your life that are sure, that are tangible, that you can actually hold on to. And remind yourself of the things, the receipts that you have in your back pocket, the things that you have come through, the things that you have lived through, the things that you are thriving at, and not see yourself as someone with just someone with a deficit.
So good.
Wow.
Thank you so much for that.
So good.
Jermaine, let me throw to you.
Sure. To every black man that has black men and young black boys that are listening to this, we have to understand that we've been, and I'm going to use Dr. Andrew Blackwood's words on this because what he said is very powerful. We've been in survival mode since we were born. We have always been in survival mode since we were born, and through that, we have, through our experiences, which are valid, we've learned how to cope, and our coping mechanisms have manifested into a lot of things, some good, some not so good. But it's about time for us to now take the opportunity to examine where we're at, because it's going to be important that we need to see ourselves, and I mean black men, black boys, go from just coping to now start living, and from living to actually thriving. We have the capability to actually reach that, but we need to begin to deconstruct some of the things that have got us to where we're dealing with anxiety and OCD and any other mental health disorders. We need to unpack those things so that we can basically be on the pathway to a life where we're living and thriving.
Wow.
Thank you so much for that.
Amen.
So true.
Running
That's
for
all.
president for,
Yep.
no, just joking. Man, amen. And we'll call the choir too, just while we're here, just to save time and get the offering ready.
The benediction, sir. If you don't mind.
Put me in the key of E flat for nearer my God to thee, as we call the choir to come. Coach Drew, your final
home.
thoughts. Take us home.
Thank you so much for that moment of laughter there. I needed that because I was about to cry. Jermaine was really talking some serious truth there. And as someone who has lived through and have a really good understanding of anxiety, if I were to talk to my younger self, I would have told him, it won't always be like this. It doesn't have to stay this way. You can
Jeez.
experience change. There is help out here for you. I would tell him that. I would tell him, like Roxanne, you're not broken.
Ooh.
You're not broken. And the idea that you have to fix it on your own is just wrong. You can't. You can't. You weren't meant to do life alone. None of us were meant to do life alone. You cannot change something you don't understand. You can't manage something you don't understand. We need each other. And it takes vulnerability to say, you know what? Something happening with me that I don't understand. Can you help me understand it? And the answer is yes. Yes. The road to healing and change is paved with understanding. There's understanding for what you're experiencing, but there's also understanding for you. You've got something, you are something amazing. Amazing. So don't try to live life alone. That's what I would say.
Thank you. And I'm going to give Dwayne a few moments because I do want him to close us out. I feel like it's his moment to do that. If you were listening and you are not watching this podcast, the rustling and maybe the background noise was everyone grabbing Kleenex and napkins, because there's just nothing but tears here in the studio. That hit home in a way I can't quite describe right now. My prayer for every Black man is that they would pause enough to heal their broken inner child, and that they would do what you just did and give themselves grace and give themselves permission to feel, to white flag. And in doing so, they can work through the darkness to the light and realize that, as they say in the old adage, trouble won't last always. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Dwayne, you had a visceral reaction to that. I saw tears. I know I was rubbing your back. What's going on with you?
Man, it's just... I appreciate your heart, Coach Drew, and your words just hit me right in the chest. I know for me as a Black man, I know so many Black men in my network who we just feel stuck, and we feel like when you start talking about younger self, man, I wish my younger self knew or had the courage or was given the space and the vulnerable and the room to be able to express what I was feeling inside as a young man, without my father, angry, all those emotions. And, I think it was you that said that we learn to just develop in spite of, and then you grow into becoming a man and you live your life. You make so many decisions out of a less than complete development. And then you wake up one morning and you realize, wow, the weight of the world, the weight of your life, the decisions, the unhealed hurts, the traumas, all of it. And you feel like, I don't have time to stop and deal with this stuff, but we have to. We have to. And I've said this more than once on this podcast, and I'll say it again, that everything that we're supposed to be, our purpose, everything that God called us to be and wants us to be, is on the other side of this healing journey. And so every Black man that hears this episode and the heart behind this entire podcast series, I want you to know that you have to. If there's ever a moment in your life where you're going to be selfish, despite what anybody wants to say or think, you have to do this for yourself. You're not doing your family, your loved ones, any benefit by staying broken, by not addressing the anxiety, the OCD, the depression, the whatever it is that keeps you up at night, that is holding you back from the best version of yourself. You are not doing yourself any favors or the people that love you. So please, please, please get the help. Get on the path of healing. Let's move from coping to, as Jermaine and Roxanne and Coach Drew said, to living and thriving. Don't you want to live? Don't you want to thrive? I know I do. And I realize at 44 that I've been coping and surviving for too long. For too long. Yeah. It's our time.
Yeah. I want to thank our guests today as we close, Jermaine Morrison, Roxanne Francis, Andrew Blackwood, for their honesty, their vulnerability, their expertise, their brilliance, and as always, pouring everything out of themselves and leaving it all here on the table for us. We have an opportunity to heal. We have a right to heal. And it is a privilege to any Black man listening. It is a privilege for us to white flag. It's not a burden. It's not a curse. It's not a sign of weakness. It's an actual moment to repair, to breathe, to reset. I heard a phrase in one of our shows, and I can't shake that thing. So for far too long, Black men have been building the plane as they're flying.
Yeah.
And if there's anything you can grab from this, it's time to land for a moment and do the internal work necessary so that you can soar. And we hope that you will listen to this podcast and everyone before and everyone after. Let this be the beginning of a new journey of healing for you, and continue to share with everyone you know all of these shows and episodes. We will see you again in the safe space.